Miss Lovell here. Today we're going to be talking about asking and answering questions in fictional stories. What is a fiction story? Fiction stories are all around us. It might be even a book that you're reading right now. For example, Magic Treehouse. These are great fictional stories. Jack and Annie are great characters in the story, but they're not real people in real life. So, whenever we're reading our fictional story today, we need to be thinking that these are stories that are not true. A fictional story can also be found in like a fable or a folk tale. So, as a reader, whenever we read a fictional story, we need to be aware of different questions that they might ask us about the story. We need to be on the lookout for the 5 W's. The 5 W's are who, what, when, where, and why, and there's also how. Let's watch a video on me describing what you should be looking for whenever you're asking or answering these questions. All right, guys, we're going to be talking about the 5 W's that you will find in fictional text. Let's get started. Okay, so our first W is who. Whenever we have a who question in a fictional story, we're going to try to find an answer that deals with a person or a character from the story. My example that I have is who found the missing shoe. So in my text, I would go back and I would look for the person or the character that found the missing shoe. Next we have where. Whenever we have a where question, the answer needs to be a place that is mentioned in the story. My example is, where did Colton find the treasure chest? So in the story, I would look for a place or a location that was mentioned to find my answer. We also have what. Whenever we have a what question, we need to find the answer, and it deals with its nouns and actions in the story to answer that question. My example question is, what happened when the frog made a wish? So that can be some nouns that answer your question, or it can be some actions that take place that answer this question. The fourth W we're going to talk about is when. Whenever we come across a when question in our fictional story, it's dealing with a time or a date that's mentioned. For example, when did Haley go to the store? In the story, it could say, Haley went to the store at night, or it could say, Haley went to the store at 10 p.m. Our last W question is why. Whenever we have a question that starts with why, the answer needs to be a reason or a purpose. For example, why did Sarah return the notebook? When you're looking in your story, you need to see why someone would want to do something. This could be a reason that was mentioned or a purpose. Lastly, we have how. Now, how doesn't start with W, but it does start in a lot of questions. So, whenever you're answering a how question, you need to be thinking of your answer that says in what way or by what means. For example, how did Jake feel when he won the game? So we'll say in what way he felt or by what means he felt. Now that we've talked about the 5 W's and how, we're going to watch a video that wraps up everything we just discussed. Okay guys, we're going to be reading a fictional story about hiking today. After we read our story, we're going to answer some 5 W questions. But first, let's dive into the story. Tamara opened her eyes and jumped out of bed. Most days she hated getting up early, but today was different. Today, Tamara was wide awake and excited. Today, her family was going on a hike. This was Tamara's first hike. She pulled on her new shoes and tied the laces. Tamara's mother had bought her new shoes just for the hike. They were brown boots. The bottom of the boots was made of rubber and had curves to help Tamara walk on rocky ground. Tamara put on pants, a shirt, and a big jacket. She was ready to go hiking. Tamara, her mother called, "Are you ready?" "Yes, I am," Tamara said. Tamara ran down the stairs. Her mother and older brother, James, were there at the bottom. They were all wearing new boots like Tamara's. James was hopping up and down impatiently. Everyone was ready for the hike. Tamara's family got into the car. They drove for 2 hours until they were far away from the city. Once they left the city in the suburbs, there weren't many buildings beside the road. Instead, there were trees and fields. Tamara saw herds of cows chewing on grass. The road climbed up. They were driving into the mountains. Tamara rolled down her window. The air was cool and she liked it. It smelled like leaves and flowers. Soon Tamara's mother parked the car. "Are we here? Is this the hike?" asked Tamara. "Yes," said James. "See that trail? That's where we'll start hiking." James had hiked this trail before, and it was one of his favorites. Tamara looked at the trail. It was a dirt path and went into the forest. Tall trees and tiny flowers lined both sides of the path. Tamara, her mother, and her brother began to walk. Butterflies and bumblebees flew over the flowers. At first the bees made Tamara nervous, but soon she saw that they were more interested in the flowers than they were in her. Tamara's mother talked about the other times the family had gone hiking. James talked about the time he went camping with the Boy Scouts. Tamara wanted to talk, but she felt out of breath. The trail was steep. They had been walking uphill for an hour by now. Tamara took hold of her mother's hand. "I'm tired," she said. "Come on, Tamara," said her brother. "You can do it. You're 10 years old. That's old enough to hike." Tamara kept going. If her brother said she could do it, Tamara knew she could. James never lied. They kept walking uphill. Tamara looked around at the plants to keep her mind off of how tired she felt. There was green everywhere. There were trees with long draping leaves that Tamara had never seen before. She saw a small and furry rabbit by the side of the trail. Tamara gasped with surprise, and the rabbit ran away at the sound. "Look, Tamara," her brother called suddenly. The trail had ended. Tamara and her family were at a pool at the bottom of a waterfall. Tamara looked up at the water rushing down, at the fish swimming in the pool. Her mother sat on a rock at the edge of the pool and began to unpack their picnic. There were peanut butter and banana sandwiches, baby carrots, and chocolate chip cookies. Tamara took off her boots and sat on the edge of the rock. As she bit into her sandwich, she dipped her toes into the cool water. "Congratulations, Tamara," said her mother. "You just finished your first hike." Tamara smiled. She decided that she liked hiking. What a great story about hiking. Now that we've read our story, let's go ahead and answer some questions. Okay, guys, so now that we've read our story, we're going to answer our questions. Remember, we're going to be looking for the 5W questions. Those are who, what, when, where, why, and how. So my first question says, who got tired during the hike? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to box in my question, my 5W question, which is who. Now, I know that whenever I'm looking at a who question, I'm going to be talking about the characters that are mentioned in the story. So my answer has to have the name of a character in the story. Now, the character I'm looking for has to be someone who got tired during the hike. So I'm going to go back in my text and I'm going to look for this answer. Now, in the beginning of my story, they aren't hiking yet. They're still at their house. So I know that I need to look in the middle of my story for whenever they start hiking. Now, this is whenever they start hiking, this paragraph right here. So this is talking about everything Tamara sees. And then in the next paragraph, we're talking about how James is loving hiking and Her mother is talking about her experiences with hiking, and it says that she wanted to talk, but she felt out of breath. And it goes on to say that she was tired. She says, Tamara took hold of her mother's hand. I'm tired, she said. So now that I've found that in my story, I know that Tamara was the character who got tired during their hike. So I'm going to write my answer on my lines. I will say Tamara got tired during their hike. Okay, now it's time for me to move on to my next question. My next question is, where did Tamara's family stop and have a picnic? So I'm going to box in my 5W, which is where. Now, I know whenever I come across a where question, I'm looking for a place. So we need to find a place where they had their picnic. In the beginning of their story, they're on their way to go hiking. In the middle of their story, they're actually hiking. And at the very end, they come to this beautiful waterfall and they decide to have a picnic. So I need to look in the very end of my story for my evidence. In this last paragraph, it talks about them reaching the waterfall. And then it talks about how her mom sits on a rock by the edge of the pool and begins to unpack their picnic. So this is the location of where they are, which is the bottom of the waterfall. So now that I've found my evidence, I'm going to write it down. Tamara's family has a picnic at the bottom of a waterfall. Great job. Now it's time to answer our third question. The third question is, how did Tamara feel about hiking at the end of the story? So I'm going to box in my question, which is how. Now, how questions, I have to find an answer that means in what way or by what means. So it helps me because it says, how does Tamara feel about hiking at the end of the story? So I already know that my answer is going to be at the very end. When you look in this last paragraph, it talks about how her mother congratulates her on doing such a good job on her first hike. It then says Tamara smiles and she decides that she likes hiking. Now, in the middle of our story, Tamara got really tired. She might not have liked hiking that much when she was super tired, but at the end, she decided that she really enjoyed hiking. So, now that I've found my evidence, I'm going to write it in my blank. I'm going to say, at the end of the story, Tamara likes and enjoys hiking. Great job. We're almost done now. We have one more question. What animals did Tamara see during the hike? So, this is a what question. Whenever I'm looking at a what question, I need to find nouns or actions that answer my question. So I am looking for animals that she saw during the hike. Now, in the beginning of my story, she does mention seeing cows, but that wasn't during her hike. That was on her way to go hiking. So that's not going to be one of my answers. So let's look in the middle of the story. Now in this paragraph, when they first start their hike, she mentions that they see butterflies and bumblebees. Now technically, butterflies and bumblebees are insects, but we'll count them as our animals. Let's see what else she finds. Ah, that's right. Near the end of our story, it talks about how she sees a small furry rabbit. These are three great animals that we can add to our answer. So now that we've marked our evidence, let's go write down our answer. I can say Tamara saw butterflies, bumblebees, and a small furry rabbit while hiking. Guys, we did such a great job on answering these questions. Now, I hope that you've enjoyed learning about the 5 W's and how we can ask and answer questions about fictional stories. I'll see you next time.